for tuning in. I know 7 weeks along, everyone's pretty sick of Zoom meetings and anything that's not face-to-face. So the countdown's on. You got only a few hours left. And we are under a little bit of time pressure tonight. So if anyone does have questions, please fire them through the chat as per normal. And we'll endeavour to get through as many as we can. But apologies if we don't get to them. Anything that is left off, we'll do our best to try and circulate some sort of response in the coming days. But tonight's guest doesn't really need much introduction, but more than happy to give him one. So Paul Williams, member of the New Zealand national panel, the Sansa Super Rugby panel, and IRB or World Rugby international squad as well. Refereed at the World Cup 2019 in Japan. Learning from your mistakes, I won't read off too many stats for fear of cutting you well short. For anyone that tuned into the talk with Jaco Piper last week. But he is the third or fourth Paul Williams to come across on Wikipedia. So no, he didn't play rugby for Samoa. No, he's not an American actor. And no, he's not the brother of comedian Guy Williams. But nonetheless, he's had a decent journey through rugby. Just under 10 years refereeing, I believe, and some pretty cool accomplishments along the way in terms of obviously getting to the World Cup as a massive deal. So first of all, congratulations there, and hopefully we can learn something off you tonight.
Thanks very much, Tim, and again, thanks very much for having me on, because not only is it a chance to talk some rugby and everyone's getting a bit excited about that because it's getting closer, but you also get me out of bathing the kids tonight, so it's a double win.
Well, there we go. We'll call it even. So for anyone who did jump on last week, the chat tonight really comes off the premise that Jaco, if you join, Jaco Piper talked with Scotty Suma Stevenson and Paul himself around, I guess, his journey in rugby and experiences at the World Cup. And something he touched on was the benefit he'd had from, at the level he has, the review process, how he works in his pods, and the follow-on of learning from others. But he talked at quite a surface level. And so what we wanted to do is, from a New Zealand landscape, bring that a bit down, drill a bit deeper, and hopefully get a bit more insight that's applicable to all of our games. And whether that sits at absolute grassroots level, I'm sure there'll be some insight, but we hope that this is really aimed at something. We get a lot of education around your junior entry level grades, and we can teach everyone how to blow a whistle and where to stand, what your signals should look like. However, the deeper you go, the harder it is to learn. And so hopefully tonight we can dig into that stuff and someone who's at the top level, what actually helps you continue to climb that ladder. So off the back of that, I guess one of the biggest aspects in terms of pro versus amateur is time, is a massive resource that you have. And using your technology and that, can you talk us through how you review your games, your performance, and what that entails?
Yeah, no, sure, Tim. Like, I think there's a couple of things that we probably need to be aware of first. Like, obviously, the review is a critical part of what we do, because it's our chance to have a look at how the game went, how we responded within the game, and then hopefully get better from that. But there's also another piece around the preview. It's not just a case anymore of rocking up with your boots on a Saturday and running out and blowing the whistle. So there's actually probably been a lot more work put into what we do before the game than what has been in the past, I guess. So what we actually have been spending a lot of time on now is actually understanding the teams, their styles, how they like to play the game, where their focuses are, where their strengths are, where their threats are, and then trying to work out, okay, well, if they're up against, if Team C is up against Team Z, how is that going to work? Like, if I was a coach, what would I be thinking? So it's about taking our preview to a whole new level. And I guess we kind of encapsulate all that in the team DNA. So first of all, it's making sure you stay true to what's been set out as a group and what's been agreed to as a group around what standards you set at scrum time, the process that you have at the breakdown, those sorts of things like that. That for me shouldn't change. We all go through times in our career where we're going really well and it's consistent, and then we go through the odd form slump where it's a little bit inconsistent. That's just reality. But I think that we should really try hard not to change that too much, because believe it or not, coaches actually do a hang of a lot of review work or preview work on us as referees about what are our areas we're hot on, what are we slightly a little bit less stringent around, so they can try and manipulate the game there as well. So we can't be delivering a product one week and then doing something completely different the next. So it's firstly understanding that, then obviously it's understanding the two teams and how they're going to potentially try and play the game. So you'll hear me talk about awareness a lot during this, but it is a really big awareness piece. So that's the first part of it. Then to go on to your question, Tim, around the review, like immediately after a game, it's a really critical time in terms of the review starts as soon as you walk off the ground, for me, I believe. And that's when your gut is telling you, okay, well, how did that game go? Was it a game that, there were some high impact decisions in that I feel like I messed up, I didn't quite get right? Did it line up with what you were thinking in your pre-match? It sort of played out that way. So that's really where the review starts. And I think in that sort of 12 hours after the game, it's really critical that you take that time just to settle everything down. I'm not talking about rushing into a formal review where you're going through each individual time in the game and putting these decisions in silos. A, was it right? A, B, was it wrong? It's just understanding your gut feel. So then once you've got your gut feel, then you can go into your review. And for me, it's a case of I try and break it down. So the first things that I try and talk about with my team of four are the big moments in the game, like the HIDs. What is the stuff that everyone's going to be talking about? And I think if you can quickly put the spotlight on those and unpack them as best you can right there and then, the better it's going to be for the entire review process. Because quite often, once we've made a decision on the field, then we come off the field, we let it sink for a while, and it hasn't been spoken about. Sometimes our minds go into defense mode, like, how can I defend this decision that I made, versus, okay, why did I make the decision? Is it right? Is it wrong? Do I put my hand up and go, yep, got it wrong? Start asking all these why questions. And when you've got colleagues around you who you trust and know are going to give you really valuable, honest feedback, that really helps with the process. And I guess that's where this whole pod concept got set up by Lyndon Bray and Sansa. And that's actually been really, really helpful in terms of that immediate sort of response to our review, and then the honest feedback that we get from our peers. So that's kind of the first thing we work on. After that, we're then looking at trends in the game. Like from my preview, let's say I was previewing the Highlanders, and I knew they were going to be going full noise at the breakdown. Did I, as a referee, was I present? Was I vocal? Did I do what the game needed me to do in that area of the game? So it's asking those questions, or was I slightly offbeat around my line out more? Was there a trend developing there that I didn't pick up on? So I try and start isolating those areas in the game. And I think the next part after that is then that's when I bring in Paul Honus, my coach. And the reason why I bring him in slightly later in the piece is because I want to have the ability to process that game myself and understand what these things are that we're talking about now, the high impact decision, the trends in the game, what went really well and what didn't go so well, what were the learnings out of it. I want to try and process all that rather than a coach calling me like as I'm driving back to the hotel after the game, going, "Hey, look, have a look at this time, have a look at that time. I think you missed." Like that's no good for me, because what it does is it eliminates the ability to be self-aware and go through that learning process myself. So when I start having those discussions with Homer, that's when we start digging into the real depth, and he starts asking me the why questions. So why was it that I made that decision, rightly or wrongly? Like we don't look at decisions in isolation and go right or wrong. A decision is a decision. There will be an outcome, and then we sort of look at everything else going on around that and start asking a whole heap of why questions. And I think that's really where you get your deepest learning from. And that's kind of where it stops there. But I mean, the trends piece. If let's say, for instance, I'm working on Scrum. If I'm working on Scrum, then I'll spend a lot more time unpacking each Scrum in the game, looking at the decisions, looking at the non-decisions, and I'll spend a little bit extra time there. But in the first and foremost, like in terms of the process, how I step through it, that's kind of how I go through things, mate.
Awesome. All right. Well, nice, really good monologue, and I don't want to cut it there, but we probably could. So to drill down a bit deeper, I'll take you right back to the start. You mentioned your preview and how important that is to set it up. And as you review each team to understand their DNA, can you talk us through, maybe not necessarily specific examples, but a bit more detail around what a team's DNA from your point of view would include?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a little bit of an insight as well. The Super Rugby camp that we attended at the beginning of the year, we actually did a little exercise where we got given the team's DNA on one side of the page. So there's no team name at the top. It was literally just the DNA of that team. And then on the other side, we got all the teams in Super Rugby. And we had to try and match up what we believed was the DNA for that team. And it was a bloody powerful exercise. It was really good. And obviously, like we know when different coaches come in or different personnel, different players come in, that may change slightly, but generally it doesn't change too much. So with that, and now talking about specifically the DNA, like I'll go back through maybe the last 2 or 3 games, and I'll look at specific areas of the game. Excuse me, where I believe a team is going to be strong. So let's take a South African side, for instance. They're traditionally big line-out maul sides, and they love it. It's an area of the game where they really attack. So I'll know that I'll need to be on my guard there and make sure I've got my pitches right. And a counter to that, if I'm the team playing one of those South African sides, as a coach, I'd be thinking, well, how am I going to diffuse that? Am I going to do it legally, or am I going to do it illegally? So it's about A, having this awareness, and then B, being able to anticipate what may happen. But I guess the danger with that is we can get led astray and start having these premeditated ideas about what a game could look like. And I'll certainly put my hand up. I've been in that position before where I've been too clever for my own good. I've done a shitload of preview work on 2 teams and then gone, yep, I've got this game nailed. I know exactly what's going to come here. And then walked out into an absolute, well, I won't say a shit fight because it wasn't a shit fight, but it was the complete contrast of what I expected it to be. And I didn't have the ability to adapt and change to what that game needed of me. So while the preview is important, it's also even more important not to believe that is the be all and end all. This is what is going to happen. It's a preview of what may happen, but then you have to have the ability of adapting to something that may change during that game, whether it be the flow of the game, the tempo of the game. A red card could completely change the game. Personnel could change that. Weather could change that. So yeah, like I say, it's previews good, but it's not something that we rely on fully.
Yeah, so you're developing tools to have up your sleeve rather than spotlight on moments that you're trying to catch. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a real quick example. It was a few years back now. I was over in Argentina, and I'd done a bit of preview work on the Jaguares, and the last few games that they'd had, they seemed to be wasting quite a lot of time getting to the line out and throwing the ball in. They were setting up huddles and taking a long time. Opposition teams were getting frustrated. So I was aware of this, and I had it preloaded as to how I was going to deal with that situation. And when the situation arose, and it did, the way I dealt with it was not the right way. I came in quite strong and heavy-handed, and I vividly remember going back and looking at it in the review on the video replay of the game. And as I was talking to the captain, I was watching his face, and he was almost like stunned, like he didn't see it coming. And then it was actually, I had a massive sort of epiphany and learning curve in that moment. I was like, wow, this right here is proof in the pudding why if you do too much preview work, it can really backfire and bite you in the ass, you know? So yeah, that's just a small little example there, but there's been plenty of other times when that's happened, mate.
And I think everyone on the chat probably, if they've ever been in the middle, they know what it's like to have that gotcha moment, which at the time might feel right, but when you look back on it, you realise probably doesn't work. If you think about managing in 80 minutes, isn't always productive.
Yeah, and I guess just quickly on that point as well, like the other part of that preview is if we do our homework well enough and we're able to see potentially something illegal that a team is doing, like it's not a case of, yeah, we've got this in our pocket here ready to go. Like we want to try and contribute to the game in a positive way. So if we've got the opportunity to do it and the time and space to do it, then we will absolutely get that message to the team and say, hey guys, this is clearly illegal and you can't do it. It's certainly not a case of, I know you're going to do something illegal, I'll wait till Saturday, bang, I got you. That is just rubbish. Yeah. So if we have the opportunity to do it, we definitely get in there first and try and right the wrong before we have to sort of blow our whistle again, you know?
Yeah. So last thing on that preview then is quickly just two parts. So firstly, so what makes up that DNA? So if you've got that list of Team X, probably set pieces are a really easy one to review, but what else are you looking at to relate that? And the second part, it would be once you step back from Super or Mitre 10, if you went out and refereed a club game, where could you then bring that to someone who you might not have as much video footage, that are little triggers you might look for?
See, that's really interesting, and I'll touch on the first point first around the DNA. Like it's actually it's a constantly moving document, so it's not a case of they are just good at line out maul. They do just have a good scrum. We dive into a little bit more detail than that around there may be a bit of a tendency with their tight head to be a bit of a nuisance. There may be, when they get advantage, they opt for cross-field kicks. So it's just these little things, and they're little triggers in the game. But again, like, I don't want to sort of spend too much time highlighting it, because a preview is great, but the real value is being able to pull out the tools that you need during the game and apply them when necessary. And which leads me on to the second part of your question around club rugby. I honestly believe, and that's probably because of the potentially the lack of videos of these teams, or perhaps the quality of them, that you're actually going out there a little bit blind. So you've got to referee instinctively. You've got to just, whatever comes in front of you, you've just got to referee it. So there's actually less chance of that sort of premeditated, preconceived ideas coming into your decision making. And I love coming back to club rugby because I have no idea what the teams are all about. I don't know who's where on the table. I've just got 15 blokes here. I've got 15 blokes here, or men and women, whoever it may be. And let's go. We'll referee what plays out in front. And like that is the purest form of rugby, I reckon, right there.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool, because for a lot of people on the chat, if you're below that Prem level, if you're refereeing Prem or First 15, you probably understand the teams, not to the extent that you might at Super, but you get the same team week in, week out. The guys that are out doing club rugby at the grassroots level, chances are they've never met the coach, they've never met the captain, they might have never been to the ground before, and so they are much more off the cuff. So I guess I'll take you from there to, you mentioned HID, so just confirming your high impact decisions for those that don't know. So when you come off the field, you say your review starts immediately. How often do you dwell on those HIDs?
Great question, Tim. Great question. I guess it really depends on the magnitude of the HID. Hey, look, when I first started out, I used to dwell on them for a long time. I think that was back when I had rugby on this ginormous pedestal, and I didn't want anyone to touch it, and rugby was the be all and end all for me. Thankfully, a lot's changed since then. I vividly remember actually early on in my Super Rugby career, there was definitely the first season. I won't name teams and I won't name coaches because that wouldn't be fair. But I ended up receiving an email from the losing coach. He was an overseas coach and the New Zealand side won. Received an email from the coach at 12 a.m. in the morning. So the game was over, we'd gone out and had a meal, couple of beers, nothing over the top, went back, and as I was opening the door to the hotel, my phone went off because it was the email thing, and I was like, this is a strange time for an email to be coming in. And here's this email from the coach, and just, it was probably had about 20 to 30 points in it, of where he felt that, I'm putting this as nicely as possible here, he thought I was a little bit off in my decision making, but he wasn't shy about the words that he used. So that for me was pretty tough to get over, because I guess I was still living in this mindset where I want to make everyone happy, don't want to disappoint anyone, want to make decisions that the whole world loves, and all this frilly shit, which we know just doesn't come with refereeing. And I was just lucky that I had a real good support network around me. And I remember having a real good conversation with Glenn Jackson, actually. And he's a pretty straight shooter. And he pretty much just told me to pick my chin up and get used to it, because that's professional rugby, that's professional refereeing. But I mean, since then, hey, look, it just comes with the job. Fortunately or unfortunately, however way you want to look at it. But what I do know is every sort of barb that gets thrown at me is just another opportunity for me to become a little bit more resilient in myself. And while I did used to get quite cut up about that, now it's a case of, here's the barb coming at me, here's an opportunity for me to just go, well, hey, look, I'm human, I make mistakes. And which probably leads me on to another point. It's like not being afraid to put your hand up when you've made a mistake, because the reality is, like, we'll all make mistakes. I mean, that's what life's all about. It's what you do next that counts. And if you put your hands in your pocket and start blaming other people and go into denial and all those sorts of things, well, there's no learning, there's no growth in that. But if you can put your hand up and just go, yeah, shit, you know what, I did get that wrong. Take the learnings from it and then go, shit, but I'm going to be a damn sight better because of it, whether that's as a referee or a person or a businessman or whatever it may be. Sorry, I've gone off a bit of a tangent there.
You're on a good tangent, mate. I think if you take those HIDs, there's a really
HIDs, that's what we were talking about. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a really strong tendency to sit with them as soon as the game finishes, and you won't let go of it until you get to see it again. And then to continue that on, I think when you get a chance to watch it, you look for that validation first, rather than, if you're really reviewing, to learn from it. So I wonder if I think we get pushed down a path of being technically correct in our early days of refereeing. So as you start to develop, those HIDs become much more about right and wrong in terms of law. I wonder if there's anything you can share around, when you review, how your learnings might not necessarily be technical.
Yeah, and that's a real good point, and we kind of touched on this when we spoke earlier in the week, Tim. And I think, like, you look at the top referees in the world, maybe over the last sort of 3 to 4 to 5 years, and I'm sure we've all sat back on our couches watching test matches and watching these guys make decisions. And while technically they may not be 100% bang on, they're making decisions that the game actually needs. And that's really having the awareness of what the game needs and wrapping the context of the game around it. And I'm not saying it's manufacturing the game or fabricating it or anything like that. But certainly in terms of the review, like would all be guilty of sitting in a room looking at clips going, yep, that's right, no, that's wrong, yeah, no, that's right, no, that's wrong, don't like that. But we've actually got no context to put around it. So we can go through our game reviews in isolation, looking at each individual decision and go tick, cross, tick, cross, tick, cross. But there's so many more other questions we can ask ourselves about, okay, well, that may not be the right decision for that moment. Well, why was it that I made that decision? Was there something else that happened or was happening in that game which led me to make that decision? And that's where you start getting the real learning. That's where you start getting the real growth, rather than just going through this sort of checklist of right, wrong, and you get a score at the bottom of it. Like, what's that? So perhaps that's a slightly, I don't know, dinosaur kind of thinking. That's what was done way back then, and it's kind of gradually sort of still kept coming through. But I think I'm confident that we're slightly starting to change the lens on how we do our reviews now, and have it more about, well, okay, what is the learning out of that decision I made versus whether it was just right or wrong, you know?
Yeah, and so with that holistic view of the game, do you, in your review, how do you go about it? Do you watch 0 to 80, or are you clipping along the way? How many times would you watch the game? Can you take us through that process?
Yep. So when I first started refereeing, so first Mitre 10 Cup game, I think it may have been Auckland. I came back from the from the ground to the hotel, watched it as soon as I got back because I had the memory stick. Straight on the laptop, I was watching it. Dad was with me. Said, "Sorry, Dad, can't deal with it at the moment. You go and get something to eat or something. I'm watching the game." Now things have changed. It's like you give yourself that buffer, that buffer to just put the game to the side, and that's where you start listening to your gut. Well, how did you really go in that game? And if your gut feeling starts lining up with what you then review in the game, well, that means your level of awareness must be pretty much in check with what actually happened in the game, versus coming off the field, shoulders rolled back, chest out, going, you know what, I nailed that. And then you go back through the review, these 6 HIDs, all these other decisions that you miss. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I was slightly off there, you know. So again, like I say before, I think that's where you get your true review, like that first gut feeling after the game.
Yeah.
But now
to have a blind view of the game, or disassociate yourself as much as you can, right? Because if you go in thinking, I'm awesome, yep, I nailed that, you're not getting anything from it.
Yeah. Oh, and it's very easy to do it as well, especially when you come off like a big game, like maybe a test match or a Super Rugby game, and you're around your colleagues. And I'm not talking about your sort of direct colleagues that you're working with, but it might be, I don't know, a referee liaison from Canberra or whoever it may be, and it pats on the back, well done, mate, good job. Mind you, that's if the Brumbies win. You get all those accolades. It's, oh, well done. And if you start buying into that shit, then you're on a hiding to nothing. The review's got to start internally first. Like that's where the gold is. And then you have your small group of people that you trust and confide in, and you know that you can be vulnerable with, and in turn they can be vulnerable with you, and that's where you get your gold. That's where you get your learning from.
Yeah, and that's hard. I don't think anyone finds that easy, to be fair. You can get better at it, but to truly open yourself up, especially as Kiwi males, we're pretty shocking at it. So
couldn't agree more.
So take us through. So do you watch once you disassociate yourself from the game?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, mate. I'll quickly actually answer the question you asked in the first place. Yeah, I do. I go through it from top to bottom. I don't even use a pen. I would have a pen, and I'll just be marking off any times that I may want to come back and have another glance at. But what I think is important that you watch it in its entirety, because that's when you get the feel and the flow of the game and how things are going, the temperament of players, all those sorts of things. If you go through the game, stop at 2 minutes 37, where you missed a side entry and you slow it all down, then you rewind it and fast forward, and where was I positioned, and then you start thinking, was that okay, or should I have blown, or should I have said something? Then you kind of lose perspective of the context of the game and everything else. So that's where I like to just sit down and watch the game in its entirety. I'll make a couple of notes as the game is still running, like I won't stop it, and then I'll come back and dig a little deeper around some of those times. And then again, like if I'm working on, particularly working on Scrum as one of my key priority work-ons, then I'll just be making a couple of notes of those as well. But in terms of how I review the game now, and what I used to write when I began, I would write pages and pages and pages and pages of my review when I first started out. Now it might be 3 or 4 bullet points and maybe a little summary, and that'll be it. And then you start digging from there. It's not a case of, yep, done, push it to the side, next. It's not like that. It's just nailing down the things that you actually want to work on, and you're actually focusing on. It's yeah, I mean, there's no point trying to cover everything because it's impossible.
Yeah. Where do you get your work-ons from?
Myself, it generally comes out of trends. Like, for instance, and I can be totally honest with you guys, one thing that I'm working on particularly hard at the moment is attacking side entry. I'm not great at it. It's something that has probably crept into the game, and yes, the sort of the microscope's been put on it a lot more as a group of referees. Some are very good at getting it, some are very hot on it. But I guess the thing is for me is I'm really aware that I don't want to be in a position where we get this message from above saying, look, we've got to start nailing these attacking side entries, and then we start putting our attacking side entry goggles on, and then we miss everything else. So it's definitely a balancing act, and I think we've definitely fallen into that trap in the past where we get this message from above, or it might be a coach or a peer or whoever it may be, and then we start narrowing our focus on one specific thing, rather than, you know what, here are my 3 priorities, and these are the things that I'm going to nail really well, and I'll do my best to pick up this other stuff. Versus, okay, now I'm focusing here. Oh shit, now this is a weakness. Okay, I better bring it back over here. Shit, attacking side entry again, you know? Sorry, mate.
No, you're good. That's all right. So if that's something you're working on at the moment, if you go back to the last game, and sorry, I'm taking you back months now.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's probably burning a hole in your head waiting for the next one. What did that review look like? So you've watched your 0 to 80, you've taken your notes down of HIDs and whatever else you're working on. So you're not going to note down every side entry or every tackle ruck to look at side entry. So you probably just put that lens on to watch the 80.
Yeah, so certainly the lens is on to watch the 80, and then when I dig into the detail about a specific work on, that's when I'll start looking at those side entries with a little bit more detail. But then when I'm looking at them though, I'm just asking why. So if a tackler is slow to roll away, if a side entry has come in, well, why is that? And then the answer to that may be, well, because there's a threat over the ball. It's like, okay then. So if there's a threat over the ball, that now becomes my trigger to start now focusing on these attacking side entries. And then the other thing is that I picked up was, if the reason why they're coming in on that angle, has it got anything to do with the tackler and where he's rolling? Because if he's rolling back through the 9 channel, then how can you expect the cleaner to come legally straight through the gate and clean out that way? So am I missing a trick there? So it's why? And then when you start going through game, you start narrowing it all down as to what the 1 or 2 things may be that are going to trigger you to start picking up those side entries.
Yeah.
But honestly, mate, that's a whole nother conversation.
So you're bouncing, you talked about those why questions. You ask yourself that, obviously you're going to go to Paul Honus as your coach for that. Is there anyone else that you bounce that idea post-review or as part of your review?
Yeah, so we're actually really lucky, mate, that like the group of 5 pro refs that we've got at the moment, we've built up a really good culture over the years, and it's probably been led by the likes of Jacko, and even Bryce to a slightly earlier extent, and like we're in a real good place now where we're not scared to open ourselves up and be vulnerable and fire a few questions at each other, because the overarching thing for us is we're all trying to get better individually, but we're trying to do that collectively as well. And I love it when Mike Fraser runs out there and he nails a game. It's like, yeah, mate, that is awesome. And it may even be as deep as going, like we were talking about something specific that he was able to then apply to that game. Like that is awesome. Like that's learning just right there in front of you. Versus, I think a few more years ago, and I think some of the maybe slightly more seasoned people on the call might relate to this, that back in the day, particularly at a high performance level, it was dog eat dog. Like you do your thing as a referee and stuff what everyone else is doing. And even to the point where when you're on the sideline working for someone, it's kind of like, yeah, I'll put my flag up, but you're in the middle, mate. So, and that has completely changed. And I think the game has kind of forced that to change as well, because there's so much onus now, not just on the guy in the middle, but the guys on the sideline, the guys upstairs. And if that unit isn't working and they're not in sync, then everyone looks like mugs, you know. So, like I say before, like I'm lucky that I've got Homer as the coach, and I was very lucky to have Bryce before that. I've had a number of people that have contributed along the way. Like I certainly haven't done this on my own, but the group particularly that we've got at the moment, we're really driving that learning hard, and we're not afraid to challenge each other. We're not afraid to put our hands up when we cock something up or need some help, and that's a really healthy environment to have.
So, and I think that's really good, because Jaco touched a very similar point last week, right? In terms of that, hey, if we're helping each other, it's a much better spot than all fighting all for number one. And can you give an example? And the answer might be no, either for lack of memory or not wanting to open up that much, but of where you can learn from someone else's review. Jaco talked a lot about opening up the reviews to everyone in the panel, where you can get that learning without having made the mistake yourself or experienced that.
Yeah, and for me, and I've got no problem answering this, mate. Like, it was certainly interesting for me when I first started out, because when I got thrown the whistle and became a referee, I had no idea what I was doing. Like when I had my first Super Rugby game, it was a case of like, go for it, go and have fun. And those are literally the words that I got from Lyndon Bray. He was like, just go and do it, mate, have fun. I was like, all right, I can do that. And it ended up being a great game. And there was just no pressure, no worries, no hassle, no nothing. And then as time went on and more people started contributing, and I probably got pressures from the likes of sort of Will, and they're not direct pressures. These were probably pressures that I put on myself, because I believed I needed to make decisions for other people, whether it be a World Rugby boss, whether it be Lyndon Bray, whether it be Bryce Lawrence, whether it be my coach. And I really tripped up, because I was making decisions that I didn't feel comfortable with, but I felt I was making them because that's what I felt those people wanted to see. And I was in this real moral dilemma about right and wrong. And thankfully, I was able to sort of get to the point in my career, and it happened late. Like it's only happened sort of, I believe, in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, where, you know, now I'm making decisions for me that I feel comfortable with. But, and I'll get back to your question, the only reason why I believe I was able to sort of do that as quick as what I did was because I had the ability to learn from the likes of the Jackos, the Jaco Pipers, the Craig Javers, those guys. And actually, those guys were actually vulnerable enough to go, hey, look, this is where I stuffed up. And I was just like a little sponge. I was running around absorbing all this all the time. And I had to, because I was getting sort of thrust through the system so quickly. I was bloody terrified, and I was so scared to make mistakes. I was like, I need to gain this learning wherever I can get it. And that's why it was really beneficial to be able to have a platform in World Rugby and in Super Rugby where we can see each other's reviews. And like, don't get me wrong, like and we said it before, not everyone has the ability to be totally vulnerable. And it's really easy to see when you're reading your review. So you handpick those guys that are willing to be vulnerable. And those are the guys you actually get some really good learnings off. And those names that I mentioned before, they had no problem about putting their hand up and going, yeah, boys, I got this wrong, stuffed up. And this is the reason why. And I was just like a little nerdy student writing all the stuff down, soaking it all up. And like I say, I had to be.
Yeah, well, if you weren't at the top level, so if you took yourself to being just a community referee, how do you think you can put yourself in that position to be the sponge, or to get those learnings off others?
Ask questions. Ask questions. Be a constant learner. Don't ever think that you're in a position where you know it all. And let's be honest, maybe I could just be speaking on behalf of myself now, but when I started out, I was like, this refereeing gig can't be that hard. And there were times where I was running around going, I got this, I know it all. And I came unstuck, and I wasn't probably the constant learner that I am now, because I see the value and the benefit of it. So ask questions, tap into resources. You'd be surprised that people in our game that actually want to help, that actually want to see a referee or a person get better. But that's not going to happen just by them coming to you. You need to go out and actually ask questions. Put yourself in a position where, you know what, I'm not great at the scrum. I really need some support around this, versus, no, I'm pretty good at the scrum. Like, you're saying this, but in your head you're going, I shit myself every time I put a scrum down because I've got no idea what's going on. And I'll be honest, these games that I'm doing at the moment where scrum days are absolutely terrible, and I'm like, every time another scrum gets put down, you know. So it doesn't really matter what level you're at. You've got to maintain that constant mindset of, I want to learn, I want to get better. Who can I ask? Where can I get information from? How can I grow? That's pretty much what it comes down to, because if you're not asking those questions, well, how can you expect to grow? How can you expect to get better?
Yeah, that's really good, man. I'm just going to wrap it shortly. I've got one more question for you. But firstly, for everyone that's on the call, I think there's 2 or 3 really key points that we've come across tonight. So I think the first one, for those that are paying attention, there's a lot of talk around tactical review and not necessarily technical. So Paul's spoken about understanding the teams and what they're trying to achieve and the why, and a lot of that doesn't come from the law book. So I think it's really valuable that if you're serious about what you're doing, that's where you dive into it to improve your game knowledge. Another one being ask questions and be vulnerable. So 2 sounds really simple at face value, but if you're really trying, you've got a growth mindset and you're learning, and you put yourself in an uncomfortable position, but one that you're going to become better, that's where you're going to get that growth. So sharing with others, asking questions, and find good people to marry up to that are probably like-minded. They'll share some of their experiences, and you can accelerate faster than you would otherwise. The question I do have for you very quickly, topically, are you a fan of the new law seen out this morning?
Regarding the post-pad?
Posts, yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Great decision. Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all been in positions where we've get teams attacking close to the line in and around the goal, and we're like, oh God, if they score against the post here, I've got no idea. So I'm either going to just have to award this or look the other way, you know. So, and I feel for defenders as well, because they're standing on the line where we're telling them to stay on side. So how the hell can you defend a post pad? So I think it's a great idea. Great decision.
Yeah, and I think Mike Lash is having a well-deserved beer somewhere tonight as well. So that's all right. No, yeah. Hey, just from me before I throw to Cody, a massive thank you for coming on tonight. It's speaking of being vulnerable, it's a pretty tough position to come in and ramble on for a little while. So hopefully a lot of people found it as valuable as I did. But personal thank you to me, or from me, because not just tonight, but tonight compounded on our conversation yesterday, have been outstanding, mate. So thank you very much.
No problem. Absolute pleasure to come on. And just on that, if there are any questions, particularly from any of the members, please feel free to pass on my information and details, and I'll be more than happy to give them a call or flick them an email, have a chat. Happy as.
Brilliant.
Thanks, guys. So everyone, that kind of wraps up our lockdown session. So in terms of, there are about 7 or 8 sessions, or 7 sessions that we've done on these. What they all really come back to is what I think we need to do as referees is make sure that we're making good rugby decisions. And that's what all these presentations, if you go back to the first one right now down to now, it's about making effective rugby decisions, not necessarily good refereeing decisions and hiding behind technical laws. It's making sure that we build and create a package which not only helps us as referees, but the players and coaches and the various stakeholders that we have to give them a better product. Because at the end of the day, the service that we're giving those players and coaches is one of almost a customer, and trying to make them have the most positive game day experience. And if we're doing that, which means we're going to enjoy ourselves more. Hey guys, we're going to take a break next week, and then we're going to come back with a more normal session and get the season running. So we'll probably start with our priorities. Again, all our sessions are open to all associations throughout the year, and we look forward to seeing you. But thank you, Tim. Thank you, Paul. Have a great night, everyone.